Hey Raiders, it's Miss R here for the daily check-in. It's Tuesday, April 21st, and I wanted to elaborate from the video yesterday. Yesterday, I talked about another way of looking at the resurrection and how we tend to hide as humans. And I used a piece of a homily that my priest, Father Jim, uses at Easter time. And he talks about how when we're scared, that metaphor, we hide under the blankets, and Jesus joins us under the blankets and basically tells us we don't need to be hiding, and he shows us a way out of the fear. So what does that mean? It's one thing to say that Jesus suffered and died and rose from the dead as a way of showing us a way out of the fear, but we need something a little more tangible to help us, especially in this current situation, these strange times that we're in. So, as humans, we hide because being human makes us really uncomfortable. We don't like our mortality. We don't like our vulnerability. We don't like being fragile. And I mean fragile in the sense of how easy it is to break bones or get a concussion, as some of you know who play sports. And right now, some of our anxiety is being heightened because life is not normal right now. So for those of you who are athletes, you're not training, so you're worried about your performance levels as a basketball player, as a hockey player, whatever sport you play. So you're worried about your athletic ability. So see, this is what I mean by being fragile and being human. We're uncomfortable with it. So back to Jesus, because I digress. So Jesus is fully human, fully divine. He takes our humanity. Remember, this is the remarkable thing about the Catholic Christian faith. God chooses to be with us in our humanity. That's key. So he's fully human, fully divine, and he takes all this stuff that we don't like, our vulnerability, our mortality, being fragile, and we see this in the last days and hours of his life. Like that, you can't get much weaker or more vulnerable than that. He suffered a really gruesome, brutal death. And as we know, it doesn't end there. Right? We have the account of the women and the apostles who then share the good news that, the tomb's empty. Side note though, remember they don't start spreading the news right away. It takes them a few accounts of the resurrected Jesus, a few encounters with the risen Christ. Takes a lot of discussions for Jesus to explain the scriptures, and then there's Ascension and then Pentecost, and then they feel confident to go and continue the mission. So if you're still trying to understand what resurrection means for you, it's okay. It took the apostles some time. It will take us some time. So Jesus, fully human and fully divine. So how does all that show us a way out of our fear? I'm going to kind of sidestep and share a strategy that's worked for me in the past. And behind me you see this whiteboard and this big circle, more like an oval because the thing is, rectangular. And so this was introduced to me, I don't know, more than 20 years ago or about 20 years ago. And I refer to this strategy anytime I feel overwhelmed. And this is, I think, one of those times. So in the big circle, so if you take a sheet of paper, just draw a big circle. And we're in this big circle on the edges, we're going to write down the things we're worried about that we have no control over. Right? So the pandemic. Right? I'm worried about that. I'm worried about the future. I'm worried about the global events getting worse. Not everyone's on the same page of how to go about with this pandemic. I'm worried about how this pandemic's going to hit refugees in the refugee camps. I'm worried about a lot of the stuff. I'm worried about what does this mean for Canada? And U.S. relations, not to get political. But I'm worried about the, climate change. How does this affect climate? What about the future? How is it going to affect, labor, etc.? So there's plenty there. Then we're going to draw a middle circle or oval. And in this circle, we're going to write down things that we're worried about that we, a little closer to home. Maybe we have a little tiny bit of control over. I'm worried about my family, my mom, brothers, my sister-in-law, my nieces, nephew, my best friends, my husband, all those relationships, my mother-in-law, actually sisters-in-law, sister-in-laws, sisters-in-law. I'm worried about healthcare workers and those of you who are working in retail. I'm worried about the elderly. I'm worried about how the pandemic's going to affect, all the people. I'm worried about people losing jobs. I'm worried about all of you. I'm worried about STA, staff, and students. I'm worried about when do we go back to school? When do we go back to STA? Not that I have some control over that, but I do have some control over still reaching out to you and helping us stay connected. So then there's a little circle. And in there, we're going to write down the things that we do have a lot more control over. So, again, I'm doing this from my perspective. Feel free to do this at home from your perspective. Me. My attitude and perspective. I have control over how I use my time. How I use my time. My day, exercise, eating, sleeping, habits, my prayer life. Okay, so the reason I share this with you today, and this is why it was shared with me, we spend a lot of energy worrying about this stuff. And then it affects this. That little inner sanctum of control that we have, that's key. So if we spend more of our energy into this, things we can control, developing a structure and routine for our day, eating well, or as well as we can, getting enough sleep, exercising, how we use our time. That's what we have control over. We don't have control over the pandemic, but we do have control over, you can wash your hands. You can practice physical distancing. Yes, it sucks. I'll admit it. I haven't seen my mom in 6 to 8 weeks when I normally see her a lot more regularly than that. I miss her so much. Talking on the phone with her is not enough, but it's what I have control over. And this, there's a way of, dealing with that energy. And often you'll hear people in my kind of business will say, use prayer, bring it to prayer. Prayer sounds like it's a very passive activity, but it's actually a very active activity. That's a topic for another video. And all this hints to a passage that I think we've heard from time to time. It's in Matthew's Gospel and Luke's Gospel. And it talks about, do not worry about your life, about what you will eat or what you will wear. And Jesus says, look at the grass in the fields, look at the lilies. They don't toil nor spin, and yet God provides for them. Now, I don't think Jesus is saying, hey, be like a hippie and just not care about anything. I think Jesus is hinting at this sort of thing. Put your energy into what you can control. We can't control other people. We can't control what policies or decisions are going to be made, but we can influence certain things, and we certainly have control over how we spend our day, what's our attitude, are we developing healthy habits. Those are the things that will help us from getting lost in the anxiety. And this isn't to belittle the stuff that's causing us worry. We are worried about a lot. I know some of you are worried about your parents' businesses that might be going bankrupt, or it might be folding because of, there's no working right now. Some of you might be worried about loved ones who extended family members who maybe have died from the virus, or have to get certain treatments at a hospital, but how can they get treatment when everything's centered around COVID-19? So there's a lot to worry about. I'm not trivializing any of it. I'm just going back to what do we have control over, because that will help us in the end. Putting things into proper perspective and using our energy for the things that we can cultivate and do things about. So hopefully that helps. I'm just sharing something that helped me and continues to help me, and I hope it helps you. Hang in there. I miss you guys a lot. I really hope sooner than later we are together again in that building we know so well that is STA. I miss you guys. I think about you all the time. Hang in there, and I'll see you tomorrow. Take care, Raiders.